Hello, hello, everyone. We'll wait a little bit for everyone to take a seat. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Responsible AI Working Group public session. So we're delighted to see you all join this session. So the goal of today's session is to go through what the working group has carried forward throughout 2022. So I'm Noémie Gervais. I'm the working group coordinator at the Montreal Center of Expertise, and I'm very happy to see you all join in person and virtually. So the Responsible AI Working Group has two co-chairs, so Catherine Regis, who's in the room right now. So she's the co-chair of the Responsible AI Working Group. She's full professor of the Faculty of Law at Université de Montréal. She's holder of a Canada Research Chair and Associate Academic at MILA. We also have Raja Chatila, who's also co-chair of the Responsible AI Working Group from Sorbonne Université, France. We have Nicolas Miali, who is the co-founder and president of the Future of Society from France. We have Alistair Nutt, who's a professor of School of Engineering and Computer Science at the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. So finally, we have Alison Cohen, who is in the room today, and she is the AI project lead at AI for Humanity at MILA. And we have Michael O'Sullivan that unfortunately could not join today, but we will hear from it later on with a pre-recorded video. So now the floor is yours, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Noémie. Can you hear me well? I think so. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We are very pleased to present the progress of our working group during the year. And this year, I just want to mention also that we were privileged to welcome the AI and pandemic response subgroup who joined the group. So it was kind of a very nice fit, and we're excited to work with them now. And before I go into further remarks, I just want to say a big thanks to SEMIA. There's a lot of SEMIA members today. Noémie, you have Ed, Stephanie, you have Sophie. She's not there, but I know she's somewhere in the center. So you've been very amazing in helping us with the group. So a big thanks to you all. Oh, the slides, right? Sorry, lack of coordination. So maybe we can move to the third slide. So another one, please. Next one. Next one. Perfect. So just as a reminder, the mandate of the working group is to foster and contribute to the responsible development, use, and governance of a human-centered system in congruence with the Sustainable Development Goals. And this mandate is really a call to action for wider participation between GPAI member governments and AI experts that believe in the mission to better understand and advance AI technologies that align with the priorities and values of our society. So we are into good AI for good. Next slide, please. Okay, so we will be presenting today the 4 projects for 2022. And these demonstrate, as you will see, the necessity of a societal response and represent urgent priorities recognized by GPAI's members, namely the fight against climate change, including biodiversity preservation, the impact of AI on human rights and governance, global health, which include resilience to future pandemic. And let's hope there's not another one, but we are better to be prepared. For 2022 and looking forward to 2023, a priority for the working group has been to work on practical implementation. So we have worked hard to develop a practical agenda to close the gap between theory and practice in AI, so to not just think responsibly, but act responsibly. And if you saw some of the previous session, as you will see in a minute, that's really embedded in our projects. We have been encouraged to see GPAI's agenda being backed more widely, such as by the Forum for Cooperation in AI, and we are very grateful to partner governments like Singapore and the UK, who have followed Canada and the French initial commitment to GPAI by becoming pioneers in establishing practical collaboration on climate change and pandemic resilience. Our hope and ambition in 2023 are that these first steps keep building to a wider movement, a coalition of action by governments collaborating on some of the biggest challenges of our time, and that governments will follow our recommendation to help them navigate such challenges. So this session is therefore also an invitation to join that coalition. If there's a project that we talk about today that you like and you'd be interested in being involved, please let us know. You can either contact me or the SEMIA team, and we are very happy to have any collaborator on our projects. So on to the project. The floor is yours, Raja. Are you there, Raja? You was there a minute ago.
You're on mute, Raja.
Oh, you're on mute, Raja.
I didn't put myself on mute. So I'm starting again. Hello, everyone, and Ohayo gozaimasu for Japan. I'm sorry for not being able to join you today physically, but I'm here remotely in Paris. So let's move to the projects actually that we have. The first project is a set of recommendations about how AI can be responsibly used and governed to take the fight against climate change. This is a shared priority amongst governments, and it has been recognized as such in the Paris 2015 COP agreement. And it's really a great honor actually to be co-leading this project with Nicolas Mihail and Lee Tiedrich. So the floor is yours. I have a lot of hello. Sorry for this interruption. So the second project is responsible AI for social media governance, and it's co-led by Alistair Knott from University of Victoria in New Zealand and Dino Pedrecci from the University of Pisa in Italy. This will be presented later on by Alistair, and the first project raised will be presented later on by Nicola. The third project is about drug discovery, and this is a great challenge for us. And as you know, during the pandemic, it was really something that has been an important work to achieve. And the project has been also led by now Elliot Lane, and Alison today will speak about it later on. The next project is the Pandemic Resilience Project led by Michael O'Sullivan, who will be also presenting further the evolution of the project with a cross-working group collaboration on privacy-enhancing technology. So this is very important because it correlates different aspects in this domain, and privacy-enhancing technologies are really important as a way to achieve this. Now, I will hand the floor to our colleagues to present the working group projects that I have just very briefly summarized. And I would like also to extend our thanks to all the working group members and additional external experts who have volunteered so much time to this work. Each project has also a specific group working on it and also advising it. Especially, I would like to thank those of the project advisory groups. Thank you to all our partner in the wider community whose engagement has helped to enrich our work and move us closer to practical implementation. This is what we want to do, actually, practical implementation. So let's now move to a little bit more details about each project, and I'm handing the floor to Nico. Nico?
Thanks a lot, Rajan. Hi, everyone. Sorry that I cannot be with you in Japan. Wish you a very fruitful summit. I want to echo, of course, Raja's gratitude and words of gratitude towards the CEMIA Center d'Excellence in Montreal for all the help provided to make the work of this working group a reality. I'm going to try and cover our current work and do a little recap as to what are our objectives, cover what we've done this year, and try and project ourselves into what we're going to be doing next year. In 5 minutes, I'm going to be short, crisp. I'm trying to be short, crisp, and to the point. So first, the project, as Raja said, is led by Raja, Lee Tidrich, and myself. And we are very thankful, as I said, to the program managers at CEMIA, Johannes, Stephanie, and Arnaud for all their help. What is our goal here? Well, as Raja said, it's really important. We are now all aware of the climate emergency. And I think that you would agree with me that the results, the relatively disappointing results of the COP27 that just ended in Sharm el-Sheikh demonstrate the need to find a responsible path to using technology, in particular in our case, AI. We need to use AI, but we need to find the right way and the right way to design and define where AI can be useful and reject in that context any form of techno-solutionism which could be detrimental to our common cause. And so that's very much what RAISE is about. It's really about developing and operationalizing a global responsible AI adoption strategy for climate action and biodiversity. And that's important to single out first climate action, which we did a lot last year to try and set the stage and set a pathway forward from biodiversity, because they have different, I would say, drivers, they have different constraints. So it was important to consider these two separately before trying to reconcile them. And that's very much according to our responsible AI approach. That's very much what we've been trying to do. And that's what I'm going to be reporting on. So that's the overall goal. What are the long-term objectives? Well, it's to help governments and stakeholders implement a strategic roadmap to inform policy around a set of high-impact use cases, to really anchor our work into reality. It's also, which is critical, to help develop an impact and risk assessment framework, like I said, to harness these technologies responsibly. And last but not least, because it's essential. And that's where we also want to continue work with members of the Global Partnership on AI and all the stakeholders to anchor this work where it's relevant. At the COP, of course, but also across the field of practices in science and tech, but also industrially with civil society, to make that work relevant, to help move forward the use of responsible AI for the environment. And we have been doing quite a bit of work on that with UNEP, for example, but we want to be continuing this journey forward. Next slide, please. So, as I've said before, we have built and we are continuing to grow a coalition of actors with whom we are working. It includes, of course, the OECD, but also UNEP, and WWF and many others. And I want to take a word here to thank, of course, as Raja said, our advisory group, but also the delivery partners, the Center for AI and Climate, and the fantastic coalition led by WWF and Radiance that have really helped us produce these deliverables that we have done this year. And also, as I said, the OECD, with which we developed a joint report on AI and compute, which I'm going to say a few words about next. And this work to build and grow that coalition will continue and is extremely important. If people don't read what we write, what's the point? So it's almost as important to produce as to make sure that relevant people are reading what we write, and that we co-produce these reports in a way that leverages the expertise that we don't have. I don't consider myself a climate expert. I certainly don't consider myself a biodiversity expert. And therefore, it was extremely important to gather with us people who know those fields better so that we can, organize the encounter between the communities of responsible AI and the communities of the environment. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we have two pillars: AI and climate action, and AI and biodiversity. Last year, it was about scoping the field of AI and climate action. This year, it was about implementing or trying to implement some of the recommendations we put forward on climate action, and also in parallel, starting this new pillar on AI and biodiversity preservation. It was also, and that's a very important part of our work at RAISE, trying to use this coalition and this growing expertise that we have to, in a way, disseminate that expertise across the global partnership on AI to contribute to working groups that are also interested in climate, which is a priority of the entire partnership. And therefore, we have supported the data governance working group and other working groups across our projects. So the question of data licensing that Lee has been particularly following at the Innovation and Commercialization Working Group, and the questions of privacy enhancing technologies plus, because it's not only about privacy, and data institutions that have been led at the Data Governance Working Group have been also a key focus of our work. It's an important part of what we want to continue to do. Let me now focus on the 3 deliverables that we are bringing on the table of our members this year. And next slide, please. So, number 1, as I said, we are very happy to have demonstrated a significant set of synergies with the OECD to set the stage, and that's the first joint report that we did on the energy and water footprint of AI compute. We wanted to demonstrate here that there is a pathway to establish independent, authoritative, benchmarking protocols and metrics to better understand what these increasingly use computing resource consume in terms of energy and water footprint. You know, we cannot move forward on climate action if the AI community does not first demonstrate responsibility. And demonstrating responsibility is leading the charge and leading by example in trying to understand better what is it that we consume in terms of the environment and water. This first report is in a way a big scoping note. And it's been carried at the OECD as well. Members are coming around to try again and push the work forward towards, in a few years, having independent, authoritative metrics to understand, to build a base of matter of fact and a solid base of evidence. It's really evidence-based policy making here that we're trying to inform, and that's the first deliverable that we're bringing on the table this year. The second is a form of implementation of our last year's report on AI and climate action. We decided to focus on one sector, the sector of electrification. Winter is coming. With the war in Ukraine, the cost of energy have been shooting up across the world. And so electrification and AI and energy sounded to us as an interesting sector to try and focus on building, in a way, a self-assessment tool to help the sector better understand what are the drivers of AI adoption, number 1, and how they can walk down that pathway. And with the support of other partners, the Center for AI and Climate, we've been able to put that report together. I'm thankful to them, and I hope that members will read and will engage with us, because next year we're going to move from that sector to an additional set of limited sectors. Again, we think, since we are doing field building, we think it's our role to help push the needle forward. And third, and last but not the least, we did an important effort this year, which is like we did last year for climate action. We did a first scoping report this year on biodiversity preservation with the help of the coalition I mentioned before. And this report is, trying to paint the picture as to what does responsible AI means in the field of biodiversity preservation. Where can AI help, and how can it help across capacity building, data infrastructure, funding, innovation? What are the barriers? What are the obstacles? What are the illusions? What are the illusions? We know that AI can also create harm on the environment, also on biodiversity preservation. Remember, AI is a lot compute. So we have done that work. It was not an easy work because the field of the intersection between AI and biodiversity is not as mature, however young, is the intersection between AI and climate action. But at least now we've got this first pillar, and we're going to try and move the needle forward in terms of implementing some of these recommendations this year. I really encourage you to read these 3 reports. They are full. Again, we are doing here field building. And so we call upon all of you, we call upon the members, we call upon the members of the community and the stakeholders to read this report and engage with us on that. As a matter of fact, right after this session, we have a little side event on the project. Next slide, please. And I'll conclude with what we're doing next year. Yep.
Nico, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, can you conclude, please, Nico?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Next year, we are going to, as I said, continue the work that we have initiated the year before. We are starting a new project with the support of the United Kingdom and its funding, the Net Zero Data Space. We are going, as I said, to focus on other sectors behind energy in terms of those booklets for adoption. We are going to do agriculture, transportation, and heavy industry. We are going to try and implement some of the biodiversity recommended aspects. And last but not least, we're going to try and bring together the IPCC, the IPBES, meaning biodiversity experts, climate action experts, and us, the AI experts, to try and chart a course thread in terms of collaboration towards research and development for responsible AI. That's it from me. Thank you very much to everyone, and I'll hand over the floor back to you, Raja and Catherine.
Thank you very much, Nico. So who's next then?
It's Ali.
Ali. Oh, the other Ali.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead.
Hi to everyone in Japan. Also, I would love to be there, but unfortunately couldn't make it from where I am in New Zealand. But I'm the co-leader of the Responsible AI for Social Media Governance project here in our working group. So next slide, please. So the focus of our project, and this is the second year that it's run as well, is on the recommender systems of social media platforms. Next slide. So social media platforms are able to give users personalized information. Each user gets their own thing because of AI, basically, because of the recommender system that delivers content to each user by personalizing what they know, what they like into their daily feed. So me on Facebook sees something completely different from you on Facebook. And that all happens because of the recommender system that organizes that user's daily feed and picking items that it judges that the user will like. And that's an AI system. And it's a machine learning system, very kind of traditional machine learning system that learns what each user likes by looking at what they click on, basically, and what they engage in. And it functions as a personalized editor, basically, just like a newspaper editor. And if you think how popular social media is in the world, over half the world's population use it, and most of them use it for many hours a day. So recommender systems in social media are probably some of the most pervasive and influential AI systems in the whole world. Definitely a topic for AI. Next slide, please. So the incredible thing about recommender systems, even though they're exerting this enormous influence on the way that information travels around the world, governments know almost nothing about how that influence operates. They don't know anything about the mechanisms which send information, to particular users, because everything is hidden in the user's own system. So we are nonetheless kind of worried about some of the dynamics that are involved with recommender systems, because a recommender system is constantly learning from each user by looking at what they click on and then recommending things, but then the users click on what they're recommended. And so there's the potential for a positive feedback loop, which could be extremely unstable. And if you think that there's also this well-known, well-documented cognitive biases in users towards things like, for instance, strong political emotions, things that are untrue or false, violent, a negative polarity, political content, all of those things might potentially angle users very gradually towards extremist political content and perhaps even violent content. Next slide, please. So we're concerned about recommender systems. But the thing is that it's very hard for people sitting outside the platforms to study these systems effectively. You can ask people to put browser loggers on their machine and see what people click on by outside the companies, but there are sampling problems for doing that. You're not sure that you're properly sampling the user population. And the existing APIs that companies surface are actually not very good at getting information about recommender systems. By far, this was the initial result of ours from our project. By far, the best methods for studying recommender systems are the methods that the companies use themselves. And that's if I want you to take anything away from this, that's the key point. The companies are in the best position to study the effects of their recommender systems, their AI systems on their platform users. And the standard way that they do it, there are many ways, but the standard way is you have two different versions of your recommender system. You try this one out on this user group that you've selected randomly, and this one on this other user group that you've selected randomly. And then you see if there are any differences between those two groups, because if there are, then you know that that difference is because of the recommender system. There's no other difference between those two groups because you've selected them randomly. You're controlling for everything else. So what we'd like to do in our project is to use data from these kinds of company experiments in collaborative projects with companies where we co-design studies that examine whether there's any effect of different recommender system designs on harmful content, and specifically on terrorist and violent extremist content for the reason that I just explained. And then what we'd like to do is to publish those findings And that would be incredibly useful information. That's what we want to do. So can I have the next slide, please? So we've been working with many groups, and like Nico was saying, the whole game here is to collaborate with many different institutions, many different fora, many different companies. We've gone to the market basically, and this has happened through this international worldwide initiative called the Christchurch Call, which is a collaboration between many countries, many governments, and many companies. And we helped define the relevant work stream in this platform on algorithms, basically asking whether algorithms encourage people along the pathway towards terrorist and violent content. Next slide, please. So one of the companies we work with specifically is Twitter, and I'm running out of time, so I won't be able to say too much about this, but we were involved in an early initiative that also involved privacy-enhancing technologies, and it was announced at the Christchurch Call Summit just recently, an initiative between the New Zealand and US governments, and also Twitter and also Microsoft. Exactly how that's going to play out now that Twitter has had such changes recently, we don't know, so that's rather uncertain. But that's not the only thing we've been doing. Next slide, please. This is the final thing I'll say. Next slide, please. We've also been working in a larger group with several different tech companies, several different social media companies in the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, in a particular working group in there. And we were working in particular with Facebook and with YouTube. Again, what we focused on in that medium is concrete implemented pilot studies. That's what we've been asking for. We haven't managed to achieve that yet. We couldn't quite get the companies to agree to do these pilots, even though they're just pilots. But we did get them to agree to continue to discuss this in focused discussions, which are still ongoing. Next slide. So yeah, we haven't actually managed to land a pilot project in any of the social media companies yet. We've been trying all year, but what we have done is to very much put our proposal out there about what needs to be done. And in the communities where these things are discussed, our proposal is seen as practical and workable, and it's got quite a lot of profile. And we're hoping that when the legislation arrives for social media transparency, that the project that we're proposing will be well placed to be one of the things that's implemented as part of that transparency effort. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. And now it's time for the other Ali. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay, I just want to make sure they have the slides. Perfect. So 1 year ago, the Drug Discovery Working Group presented a set of recommendations. And these recommendations were designed to allow and help governments intervene in the current drug discovery ecosystem. An ecosystem where it currently takes, on average, 10 years to bring a drug to market and between $1 to $3 billion. And the reason we were supporting governments in intervening in this market is so that we could see more drugs being developed that were better aligned with global healthcare outcomes, and also drugs that are more proactive, more accessible, to name a few reasons. Since then, our ambitions have actually widened, and we've created a report that showcases how governments internationally could collaborate on this effort, and that's the subject of today's presentation. Next slide, please. So before we get into the solution, I just want to make sure we're all aligned in terms of the problem that we're solving. And the problem that we're solving was co-defined with 25 international multidisciplinary experts over the course of 1 year. The problem, as we understand it, is several-fold. Firstly, the most important factor in whether a drug is successfully brought to market is whether there is a commitment from large pharmaceutical companies. And therefore, large pharmaceutical companies have an overwhelming amount of influence into the drugs that are being developed. Of course, large pharmaceutical companies are looking to not only recoup their investments, but they're of course looking to make a profit. And this has a big impact on the types of drugs they find interesting to conduct research on, quite often leaving those in lower and middle income countries not properly satisfied with the drugs that are being researched, just by virtue of them not being economically interesting. The other challenge we're dealing with is that a lot of the work that goes into drug development is you only see the fruit of that work once a drug is patented. And therefore, all of the work leading up to that point, whether that be algorithms being developed, data sets being created, they are kept as trade secrets in the process, which of course stifles innovation by virtue of a lack of information sharing. Now, all of these factors are leaving us all vulnerable to all sorts of existential risks, areas of drug research that are not being pursued because, frankly, they're not lucrative. And there are numbers around how vulnerable this is leaving us, in fact. It's estimated that it is in the billions of dollars in terms of damages that we're being exposed to by 2050, not to mention hundreds of millions of lives that might potentially be lost in the coming decades by virtue of areas like antimicrobial resistance not being sufficiently invested in. Next slide, please. Our vision is to interrupt this market failure. We want to create a drug discovery ecosystem that's more innovative, proactive, and aligned with global healthcare outcomes. And we see this work being catalyzed by the espousal of artificial intelligence technologies for two reasons. One is that artificial intelligence can fundamentally change the cost structure of drug development, allowing for new actors to become involved in new areas of drug research to become interesting. And two, AI is uniquely situated to navigate biological and chemical space, allowing for untold advancements in scientific discovery. Next slide, please. Now, like other market failures, we are proposing that the government needs to intervene in order to address these challenges. We see government intervention coming in the form of financial incentives and strategic directives to identify the priority disease research areas that need to be pursued, the stakeholders that are involved in this process, not to mention the ways in which AI is leveraged in this context as well, by creating incentives but also enabling policies for the use of artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. So we in this working group are not the first to recognize this need and this opportunity. Luckily, there are several international health organizations that are pursuing research into areas of, into diseases that are being neglected by the market, areas like malaria, MERS, disease X, to name a few. But their work doesn't allow for the fundamental market shifts at scale that we know would otherwise be possible with the use of artificial intelligence. So we see ourselves as partnering with international health organizations, providing them with strategic funding and AI advisory support in order to help them integrate artificial intelligence into the drug discovery pipeline that they're working on in order to realize the fundamental market shifting potential of artificial intelligence. Next slide, please. Now, this is just an outline of the drug discovery pipeline. All of these phases of drug discovery can strategically leverage artificial intelligence in a variety of ways. This is actually just a snapshot of it. It's more detailed in our report, which I invite you to read. Next slide, please. So this presentation is really just to essentially welcome you to reach out to us if you're interested in becoming involved in this effort. We're looking to create a pilot study where we, again, work with folks from academia, government, biotech firms, and of course, international health organizations to make this vision a reality. Thank you.
Right on time, Ali. Thank you very much. And then for last, not for least, we have Michael, but he's going to be on a, it's a recorded video. He's stuck on a plane.
Koto, apologies not being able to be there with you live. My flight from Auckland to Wellington was delayed by 40 minutes. So by the time you watch this, I'll be in the air going from one to the other. My name is Michael Sullivan, and I'd like to introduce the Pandemic Resilience Project and our activities in 2022. So I'm one of the project colleagues, along with Margarita, and we have two managers, Steph and Emma, who've been doing an excellent job of helping us keep this project going along. The project has two main aims. One was to catalogue and assess AI initiatives relevant to pandemic resilience and produce a living repository, which we'll talk about next. The second was looking at those initiatives to build a collaborative AI model that aggregates these models of non-pharmaceutical interventions throughout the world, and the resulting aggregated models should be able to be deployed quickly to other countries throughout the world and provide policy advice to those countries. So this is a screenshot of the Living Repository. We have a prototype web page, which enables researchers to look through all the different initiatives that we've studied and evaluated, to filter them depending on, for example, domain or approach, as well as download a CSV file which has all of the information in case they want to do research on the raw data that we've collected. This website is almost ready to go live, and we hope to get that live in 2023. In terms of the aggregated model or the ensemble of models, we looked at the top NPI initiatives. Remember, NPI stands for non-pharmaceutical interventions, and we've recruited 3 of those models. So a neural net model from Cognizant Technology, a cyber-physical model, and stochastic models from the University of Auckland to come together within the ensemble of models. We've also got advisors from CMU in Africa and the Coma Consortium in Cornell to help guide how the ensemble of models put together, and the integration coordination being provided by CMU, and also some contractor facilitators who help us build this co-created initiative. So the key idea here is that these models will be, which will create in particular locations, we're then going to generalize them across multiple locations, generalize them across multiple different parameters, and then calibrate all of the models in all of the locations using open data and a meta-heuristic approach. This will then provide a calibrated model which is easy to deploy to a new location and provide good model advice for governments and how to deal with pandemics at those locations. At the moment, we've gone through a couple of co-development workshops, and we're now moving to the development phase, which is going to happen at the end of this month. And the outputs from this project will be a project report describing what we've done and what we've achieved, as well as a software package, which, as I said before, should be able to be rapidly deployed to other countries throughout the world who don't have these models, and help inform the use of non-pharmaceutical interventions for pandemic response. The last thing I'd like to mention from this project is that we have been doing a cross-working collaboration with privacy-enhancing technologies, and that's because PETS determined that pandemic resilience was a great use case for the privacy-enhancing technologies. And you can see an example of here, this on the left, where without PETS we get a lumped model which would result in those red curves for the progress of a pandemic in terms of number of infections. However, if we had access to private data, in fact, we'd realize that the infection was progressing like the blue curves. And with the privacy enhancing technologies, we don't have full access to that private data, but we do get a privacy preserving view of that data. And that enables us to do the green curves, which is a closer approximation to the blue curves, but also the orange curves, which is the PETS models with perhaps a little bit of noise, which could occur through the privacy enhancing technology. And so even a slightly noisy PETS model is a better approximation to what is actually happening than these red lump models. So with PETS, that enables us to incorporate private data in a privacy preserving way within our pandemic resilience models. Okay, so sorry once again for having to do this recording, but I hope this explains it well. I might be able to join you at the end of the session, depending when my flight lands. And I hope the rest of the session is fun, and happy to answer your questions through Steph or Arnaud or Margarita. Kia ora koutou.
Okay, so that's it for the presentation of our projects. Now we will take questions. We have about 15 minutes for that. We have access to the chat. Noemi will manage the chat, and I will take the live question, and we will alternate between the two. So the floor is open for questions. Anything in the chat, Noemi?
Not at the moment.
Yes. I don't know if you have a mic, or I can pass it on. What do you have? If you can just briefly introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for all those great presentations. I'm Patricia Thane, co-founder and CEO of a company called Private AI from Canada. And my question is specifically about the what kind of interactions you've had with private companies, including for drug discovery, for example, what their reception has been to this, whether they've put any aid behind it, and whether you've had any pushback from them at all.
Yeah, I think this is a really great question, likely for all of our projects, because they do require active engagement and involvement from the private sector. And there are so many layers to this answer. But first of all, so we have met with, at least I can speak from the Drug Discovery Working Group perspective, we have met with a couple of folks from the private sector who, of course, are interested in creating a more sustainable model for them to be able to research pathogens that are currently not lucrative for them to be researching. But from their perspective, it really rests on creating novel push and pull mechanisms, incentive structures in getting them engaged and then having them engaged until delivery in order to make this work profitable. And so from our perspective, at least, a lot of the research continues to be in how we can create incentives that are I guess, interesting enough from a financial perspective that it renders the work interesting for the private sector. And I guess another important aspect of this, from my perspective, is that we think that governments will be most interested in funding this research if they recognize the value that it brings, not just to drug discovery, but also to the ecosystem of artificial intelligence within that country more broadly. And so a big part of the work has been trying to quantify what this type of investment could mean for a larger biotech industry in a particular country. So we definitely have an eye to the impact that this could have in the market and ways to get private sector actors meaningfully involved.
Ali and Nico, would you like to add something? I'm sure, Ali, you would like to add something on this, right?
So certainly, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think all the projects in our working group have this interesting interaction between external stakeholders and straight commercial companies. You know, often some of the largest tech companies in the world, the largest companies. And that's certainly been our experience. So we've interacted with many social media companies, either individually or in collections. And in terms of how it's gone, it's been very interesting. We've sort of had input at sort of high policy levels and also sort of mid-ranking levels. We've talked to all sorts of lawyers, and the companies tend to put their lawyers forward rather than the engineers. The engineers are the one group of people who we haven't talked to. And we want to talk to the engineers. We're AI researchers, and we want to co-design an interesting project with them, but it's very difficult to get to the engineers. And so one thing that we hope we can do is to have conversations that actually involve engineers. And we've also tried to talk to governments, you know, and have governments introduce us or broker arrangements with companies. And we've been quite successful with Twitter during the past year. But as I say, the situation with Twitter is now very much open for grabs, and we're not sure what's happening there. But what goes on inside the companies, we only see kind of the very surface of the companies. And there's all these interactions that people who take our projects, our proposals, and take them into companies and then talk about them in ways that we don't know. All we see is this external facing sort of people, mostly lawyers and policy teams in the companies. So I suppose that's my answer. And it would be nice to be able to talk to the engineers is my main point.
And Nico, you want to add something?
Yeah, well, in our field, as you remember, there are 3 streams of work. And so we're trying to field build. So we have interacted quite a bit with the industry and technology. Probably different from what we're seeing in other projects, particularly in the project that Ali has been co-leading. You know, it's not a governance project. It's always more difficult when you're trying to have something that is governing the cooperation you have across you. It's always easier when you're trying to help build capacity or bring long-term funding to them. In 2 of our work streams, we have more been in that domain. So for us, the worry has been more, how do we engage meaningfully? And how do we stay away from greenwashing and techno-solutionism? In a way that is not dark, in a way that is really constructive, because we know from Sharm el-Sheikh that technology will not cut it all. We need to change our behaviors. That's it. So that's been a bit more that. And then in one of our projects, which I remember is about, setting the stage towards independent and authoritative benchmarking towards energy and water consumption of AI compute. Yes, there the situation is a bit different. So we have been extremely, I would say, satisfied with the level of initial cooperation that the OECD and GPAI have had with big tech. So we have had a number of interviews to try and define and develop the framework that we have put forward. But in conducting those relationships, we have tried to remain independent and to build a pathway towards independent benchmarking. So that's why we've seen both sides of the equation. We need to continue moving forwards towards building an independent, authoritative collaboration with the private sector. At the end of the day, it's about company and civil society, which will create the conditions for climate action and ecological transition. And a government alone cannot solve it. So without companies who create the solutions, who deploy the solutions, it won't be possible.
Okay, other questions? We have 2 over there. There's one in the back and then in the middle.
Hi, thank you for all the presentations. My question is specifically for Nicolas regarding one of the reports, specifically the one at the intersection of AI and biodiversity. And I was just wondering if the report contains information, and if so, kind of what would be a crisp summary of why it is that that intersection, AI and biodiversity, is so far behind the intersection of AI and climate. I'm sure there's many layers to the answer to that question, but I'm wondering if there's like a bit of a summary in terms of why that is.
Well, thanks a lot, Benjamin. Great question. And let me put it in plug here. Do join the side event we're doing right after this session, because we're going to be discussing that report in detail and the drivers of it. So to keep my response to you very short, yes, the report attempts to define why there is a bit more of lag, but I think that the lag is seen besides AI and the notion of AI. The field of climate action is more mature already. You've seen the intensity of the political and civil society commitment around COP27. Don't forget that in 3 weeks, actually less than 3 weeks, in 10 days, there will be another COP called the COP15 on biodiversity, which is taking place in Montreal. And that's so the level of political maturity over or collective understanding as human beings as to what biodiversity depletion means, what are its drivers, what are its consequences, is in and of itself less mature. And as a result, intersecting AI with that becomes more difficult. That's one key factor. That's not the only one. And because I don't want to take the floor for too long, I want to hear other questions. Thanks a lot, Ben, for this question. And do join you and all the others, the side event we're doing right after this. Thank you.
There's a question over there.
Hi, my name is Andy Wyckoff from the OECD. I think my question goes to Alistair, but picks up on something Nico was saying about various types of washing. And that for Alistair, it's a great proposal, your recommendation engine A/B testing. I was just a little disappointed to hear that you couldn't get the firms to engage with you without legislation in place. And so what does this say about the Christchurch call and them being members of that, but not really engaging? And same thing with GIFCT. Can't you do this through GIFCT? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great question. We were really hoping, the reason we chose terrorist and violent extremist content was so as to dovetail with the Christchurch initiative, which the companies were already completely committed to, very actively committed to in many cases. I think it was, yeah, it was just, yeah, it was difficult to bring them along, I guess. What we hoped was that they would want to participate in the discussion around how the legislation would look, because the legislation, like in the EU, for instance, is very broad, very wide-ranging powers are going to be given to regulators. And we hope that the companies will want to participate in a discussion about the best form that legislation could be taken, could take in very practical terms. What sorts of things should be implemented? What sorts of things are doable and fit for purpose? And there were certainly some people in the companies who wanted to do that. But again, collectively, those companies have an awful lot of inertia behind them, and it's very difficult to get decisions made. I think the best thing that we could hope for is to talk to the people at the very top levels of the companies. Those are the people who are most efficacious in bringing about real change and leading new policies in that area. And we're still hopeful to do that, and governments can be very helpful, and the OECD as well, I should say.
Okay, other questions? We still have time for another one or maybe two questions. Last chance. Okay, so if there are no more questions, maybe we can conclude. So thank you all for presenting. And also I just want to mention that for next year, we're going to start on new projects. I just want to give you some information about that. So we're going to have a project on diversity and gender equality. And I want to mention that we're going to have a session tomorrow at 10. We are going to start this discussion and talk about the project, so please attend if you are able to. So the project on diversity and gender equality, and that's a slide at the end of the slide deck. It's going to be about ensuring that AI ecosystem have the tools and the commitment to incorporate effective gender and diversity approaches throughout the AI lifecycle, and to demonstrate their impact and result with indicators in accordance with international standards. So that's one of the projects. Another one for 2023 is going to be about developing some prototypes for sandboxes for responsible AI. So it will be about providing a framework to support governments to address gaps in evidence, policies, and capacity, and it will be mostly focused on government procurement. And also a third project will be about the Responsible AI Deployment Challenge and Fund. And this project is going to develop a hackathon-style challenge that will provide opportunities to deploy and scale responsible AI solution while encouraging cross-functional collaboration. So we have a lot on our plate. It's going to be a very interesting year, so stay tuned for this project. And otherwise, I just want to, again, thank you very much first for attending this session, and also to our experts, are part of the Responsible AI group, who work really hard, and so we thank them for their commitment. They're essential to what we do, and they give their time generously, so thank you very much for that. Again, Samia, for your help. And that's about it, and please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any question. We're always happy to discuss further our projects. And Raja, you want to say one last word before we close the session? If you're still there. Yes, you are. Okay. You're again muted against your will, I think, Raja.
Yes, thank you very much again for attending this session. We are really proud to have been able to conduct these projects, and I think you have seen that their outcome is really a very important one, and in very challenging areas. Indeed, what we want to do is go for more implementation practice, So I would like to invite you to join us in the side session, which is just after this, about the work in the RAISE project with several different outputs. And we would like also to ask you to engage with GPAI members and our experts on all these activities that we are really looking forward to pursue next year. Thank you very much for attending.